Betsy Schuster. I'm the Vice President of Program Development at the Helpline Center. And so I work with a lot of our internal programming through 211, our suicide crisis work, which will include 988, which we'll talk a little bit more about, and then some additional support programs that we're continually working to build out. And so today, I really like the trainings to be as interactive as possible. This is my first time presenting to this group. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to unmute yourself and ask or put it in the chat. But I do want the next 2 hours or so to be as interactive. To part of it is I will go over some mental health statistics, some skills on if you are working with someone that might be having a mental health issue or are concerned about suicide. We'll touch that high level. Of course, there's many, many more in-depth trainings I would encourage you to take on top of what we'll cover today. But then also I want to spend some time directly on our website. So you have those resources at your fingertips. We do a thing called Helpline Center University with a lot of professionals, where as a professional, 211 and soon to be 988 is available 24/7 with trained crisis specialists and mental health counselors. But that doesn't, so when I talk about our website and all those resources on our website, that never means you can't call. But as a professional, so many of that information is right at your fingertips. So I talk about some of those things that are available to you as you're working in your field that hopefully can make your life a little bit easier on those days where your to-do list is very long and you're trying to connect an individual with resources beyond what's in your immediate purview of services that you're providing. And so to get started, I am going to share my screen. And I just got to, and whenever I do this, they hide the video panel. So I always have to find the video panel again so I can see faces. I don't know why they just wouldn't leave it like that, but okay. Thumbs up if you can see the Helpline Center website. Awesome. So we were going to start with a PowerPoint, but then I'm going to jump over to a video right away. So we will start on our website. So the Helpline Center, all of the information when I'm live on the website will be at helplinecenter.org today. But we've been around since 1974 in South Dakota, and then slowly has expanded. So much of our services are now statewide. And so our 3 core service lines per se that we talk about is our 211 helpline, our suicide and prevention services, which will turn into 988 coming in July, and then our volunteer services and connections. So volunteer, real briefly, that is in 3 South Dakota communities. It's in Brookings, Sioux Falls, and Rapid City. And so those, the Volunteer Connections program really works to promote volunteerism within the community and to connect individuals who are looking to volunteer with an agency. And so there's once in a while confusion, like I want to volunteer for the Helpline Center. We actually don't really have that many volunteer opportunities at the Helpline Center, but we work to figure out what agencies in the community best fit their interests or skills and refer them to that community agency. One option we do have, if you're serving one of those communities and you're working with someone that does have community service hours, that is a high request that we get, is individuals reaching out saying, hey, do you have a list of opportunities that meet community service requirements? So once again, if it's in Sioux Falls, Brookings, and the Black Hills area, we play that role as the volunteer connection agency. And then the 211 helpline has been around since 2001. We were the first 211 west of the Mississippi to launch. And then we went statewide in July of 2020. So from a statewide perspective, we're still relatively new, but we started in the Sioux Empire in 2001 with a 3-digit number for information referral services, and grew that across into different counties over the next 20 years, with that statewide starting in 2020. So we're very excited for that service to be statewide. And then our suicide crisis and support services is under a little bit of a transformation right now with the launch of 988. So we'll cover what we have now, and then we'll talk about the future of what's happening in July. And then the other thing that we're developing more and more is under what we call our support programs. And so our support programs, the best way that I like to explain them, is like another level of care and connection to get them to where they need to be. And so the mission of the Helpline Center is really making lives better by giving support, offering hope, and creating connections all day, every day. And so with that, we play a neutral role. We're not a government program. We're not a medical or a doctor's office. We can be that neutral role of connecting and encouraging to say, hey, you really need to get to this support group. Well, so how can we get you over those barriers? Maybe by weekly phone call for 6 weeks, maybe by helping them calling ahead. And so these support programs, we have a caregiver support program. So caregivers that are caring for older adults. This was launched during the pandemic with United Way Worldwide and AARP support, knowing that a lot of caregivers forget to take care of themselves. And so they get burnt out. And so how can we help them get to caregiver support across the state? We have an outreach support program for older adults, sort of the flip side. So the ones that they love and they're caring for, they need support too. And so we provide that in the Sioux Empire with funding from the Sioux Empire United Way. We have a childcare helpline, which if we have time, I will share a little uplifting video at the end. It is National Childcare Provider Appreciation Day. And so I don't know if any of you are friends with myself personally on Facebook or friends of the Helpline Center. There's a very cute video of children thanking providers in a very tough field right now. So if we have time, I will share that short video that we just posted about an hour ago. And once again, connecting parents to childcare services. We have a health navigation women's program as well, which works to, this is in partnership with the Department of Health. This has been going for about 5 years, realizing that South Dakota has a lower screening rate for preventative cancer, specifically breast and cervical cancer screenings. And so realizing when someone calls into 211, if they don't know where their food is, if they're in a mental health crisis, if they're in a utility crisis, whatever crisis, they're not thinking about that preventative screening, and they might know they need to call the doctor, but it's very overwhelming. And so our health navigator screening specialist helps cover those needs and then say, okay, let's get you to a doctor. Let me get you the paperwork. Let's make that connection. So that's our health navigation program. Our Helpline Center Network of Care and Community Information Exchange, I'm not going to touch on much today. It is a transformational project also with the Department of Health, working to connect social services with healthcare, realizing we need to close the loop. And so there's more information coming in the next month or so on that. So that's just a little bit of a teaser, but that will take 3 hours to introduce today. So we want to get to the meat of what we want to talk about. SD Cares is we are one of the partners with South Dakota Housing Development Authority to provide rent and utility assistance. Individuals, if they've had a negative financial impact since the start of the pandemic, they may qualify for up to 18 months of rental assistance or utility assistance. And so there's 9 agencies that are partnering. You can access it initially by 211, and we can get you connected and applied. So if you're working with someone and they're concerned about rent or utility, there is a very available funding right now, specifically through some COVID pandemic money.
Betsy, because we've been getting calls here at our agency for that, and Minnie at our front desk actually requested some of your booklets, which has been very helpful, but we could drive them to that SD Cares then. Is that the best thing to do?
Yeah, so what we do is, now let me get to, actually just links it back to the South Dakota Housing Development Authority website. Okay. So the initial application is online, and East River Legal will help people walk through. We will certainly try to help them on the phone as much as possible. So what happens with that is they apply first with some basic information and an email, and then they get a tokenized email to a dashboard where they upload more information and get assigned a case manager. So we can walk them through that. So Michelle, very easily, you can say, hey, dial 211, and they'll explain that. Otherwise, just you can go here and it links right back to South Dakota Development Housing Authority with the link to the application.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we used to, but starting in February, we no longer process any of the applications here because Minnehaha County, in the Sioux Falls area, Minnehaha County, ICAP, LSS are processing applications. ICAP has like 14 counties. Grow, South Dakota is a partner, Pennington County, Rocks. I think I'm missing a couple more. And so once the initial application is completed, then it gets assigned a case manager at the agency. But if someone's like, I don't remember who my case manager is, they can call 211 and we can get them connected. And so then the other one get covered, we recently have partnered with CHAD, the Community Health Cares Across Dakota. I might have messed that acronym up just a little, but to have a certified health insurance marketplace navigator on our staff. So if someone has questions about healthcare insurance, they can call 211 and we have a certified navigator on our staff that can help them or get to a navigator out in their communities as well. So that is a new program too, which is a really cool partnership that was created. Substance use care coordination. This is in partnership with the Department of Social Service Behavioral Health and the Opioid Response Grant. So what we do with substance use, it's really walk alongside that individual to get to the resources in their communities that they need. And so it's not a counseling position. It's more like, hey, here are some assessment options. Here are some treatment options. Here are some different resources, support groups, AA, NA, all of that. And we might give you a call for the next 6 weeks to say, hey, did you get to that? How can we help you get over that barrier? So that is our substance use care coordination. Another big thing through that program right now is medication lock boxes. So actually we have 500 medication lock boxes in our lobby right now that are supposed to be picked up at 10:30. So anyone in South Dakota can request a medication lock box. It's one per address. So you can request it by calling the South Dakota Resource Hotline, or you can call 211 and we can help you too. Otherwise, on our Avoid Opioid SD, they can sign up for a medication lockbox. So if February was our highest month where we sent 1,600 out, you guys might have seen some of those commercials, but working in this field specifically, it's a very cool free tool to help lock up some medication if that is a temptation or a risk factor for someone that you're working with. So those are ongoing. And we are getting lots of requests every month right now for those medication lock boxes. And then the last two, which is very interesting and brand new, is we have received national grants from United Way Worldwide to do transportation access and last mile delivery. And so Ride United Transportation Access, this is a brand new program. Pretty much as January, we did a soft launch in February to figure out individuals can call 211 and access Lyft rides for social needs services, up to 6 rides. And then once they hit 6 rides, then we have a transportation specialist that will do like a level 2 intake to say, okay, what's your long-term solution? Like we might say, okay, let's get you 4 more rides because your car is broken down and it's gonna get fixed tomorrow, whatever that may be. And so in February, we did 400 rides just on people calling 211 with no promotion. And we wanted to figure out what was the demand for that. So 80% of the riders, we helped 130 people in that month, and 80% of them had 5 rides or less. So that's why we came up with the 6 ride. It's really that stopgap emergency. I need to get to work. I need to get to a doctor appointment. Are some of our top, and what's really cool about this funding is really looking at social needs as a whole. So it's not only for medical, but some of our top ride case uses have been medical and dental, but food, job interview. And so like, let's get you the job interview, but then long-term, let's figure out. So we've also have been giving rides to get to cell phones. So we'll talk about a free cell phone plan and data plan that can be paid for 2 years through the Affordable Connectivity Plan. Really, cell phones is now is a critical issue and need. Think about how much is done on our cell phones, applying data plans. And so that is considered a social need. So we've given people rides to get a cell phone and data plan through this program. So real basically, anyone can get 6 rides. They have to do an intake, but after 6 rides, if they need more than that, then they meet with a transportation specialist to figure out what is the barrier and what's a long-term solution. And that is available anywhere there is Lyft in South Dakota. And so it's a little bit, we just search to see if there's a Lyft driver. We can schedule a ride up to a month in advance for a Lyft driver. But we have given rides surrounding Sioux Falls but sometimes Lyft drivers turn their Lyft on and off, of course. So really think the bigger cities of South Dakota, typically we can always get a Lyft ride. And the final support program I want to talk about is our last mile delivery. So we have partnered with DoorDash, where we partner with nonprofit agencies to get things delivered to individuals by DoorDash. And it's a really cool thing. DoorDash are paid through our grant, and it's free to partner with us. And so we have delivered everything from food to school backpacks, to underwear, to socks, to Christmas gifts, to pet food, really any type of social need. And so we have partners in Yankton, Sioux Falls, Brookings, Rapid City. I think those are our main ones right now. We have, since July of 2020, when we started this, we have delivered over 15,000 deliveries. So it's just a great partnership. So if that is of interest, there is a video here talking about it. We won't show it today, but if you are at a nonprofit and you're like, hey, we would love to get some deliveries out to families. There's a few restrictions, but it's a 2-day turnaround. And so in Sioux Falls, for example, how many of you guys have heard of the Friday food giveaway if you're from the Sioux Falls area? So we are a huge partner with the Friday food giveaway, where not everyone can get out there on Friday. So if they call Monday or Tuesday, we can get them a delivery on Friday, a contactless delivery. So that's a very cool partnership. They don't get as much food as if they went to the delivery, but it's something to help them with that food insecurity. So that is open to anybody in the Sioux Falls area, is one of the ongoing partnerships. We also are with Feeding Brookings and Western Community Action out in the Black Hills.
So Betsy, can you mention again so is it just Sioux Falls, Brookings, and Rapid City?
So the DoorDash is where we partner with the agency, and then we work with them on how. So some agencies, they already have their list of who they need deliveries to, and they just submit that list. So there's no calling into 211. The Friday food giveaway is they can't take all those phone calls. So that's how we've set up, like the intake is 211, and then we send them who needs to be delivered. So I went out to a delivery for pet food, and we had 150 pet food deliveries. And I was like, okay, we have to provide a 2-hour window for the DoorDashers to actually come and get this stuff. All 150 were gone in 20 minutes. Because these DoorDashers, what DoorDash does is it maps it. So the DoorDashers, they call them dashers, they actually like these because instead of going to get Michelle's food and bringing it, and then going to get Robin's food and then bringing it back, they get mapped. So they might pick 5 deliveries up at once and get like ding, 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 because it might be in the same street or the same apartment. So this is more working with the agency that wants to get stuff out to families or to individuals, and then we work through some of that.
And then your grant pays for the cost of the DoorDash.
Yep.
Got it.
So DoorDash, it's right now, our United Way Worldwide grant pays for all of our staffing to run the program. And then they, on the back end, pay all the DoorDashers. So right now there's no fee to partner with us. So we were the first to have backpacks. Like originally they started with only food, and then we partnered with the banquet because during the pandemic, they couldn't get backpacks out to kids. And so we went to United Way Worldwide and was like, hey, can we use backpacks? And they said yes. And so that was like sort of the start of opening it across the nation to other social needs. So that is a very brief overview, but I think it's important that I wanted to talk about support programs. I'm realizing that if you're working with an individual that might be caregiving for a loved one, or we can maybe provide some supplemental support, so you don't have to carry that burden completely by yourself with so many different complex needs going on. And so, as Michelle referenced, the Helpline Center, we moved into a brand new space. We went from 5,000 square feet to 15,000 square feet in January. So I'll show a quick tour video so you can get, I think sometimes it's helpful, a concept of where the work happens as we jump into the mental health portion of the presentation.
Welcome to the Helpline Center. After nearly 20 years in the nonprofit center, we expanded to accommodate our growing programs and teams. This remodeled space is ideal for future demands, so we can continue to serve our community's needs. First known as the Volunteer and Information Center, the Helpline Center was started in 1974 by a devoted social worker named Fern Chamberlain. The sculpture inspired by Fern's work was dedicated in fall 2021 near the 6th Street Bridge on the bike trail. One integral part of our success is the database team. This tech-loving team manages our resource database of more than 5,000 programs and services. Our priority with the call center was to design a space where we could expand and cooperate comfortably, along with the abundance of natural light. This collaborating workspace has adjustable standing desks and ample office space to accommodate the dedicated staff who are present 24/7. Upgrading from 9 workstations in our previous space to an extensive 27 stations has allowed the Helpline Center to continue growing with our community. The break room has been a new addition to our workplace, allowing our team to gather for the first time. There is a micro market available for purchasing snacks and beverages, as well as an ice and water machine. This bonus area has been a hit with the employees. Our technologically driven training rooms will support our internal team with focused training that will help lead our external community as well. We're now heading into the workspace that is home to our family support programs, suicide prevention and crisis support, volunteer connections, and our technical support staff. As we near the end of our tour, we'll swing by and say hello to our CEO, Janet Kiddams, and take a peek into the Fern Chamberlain boardroom before we head down our grand staircase. Thank you for checking out our new space, and thank you for your continued support of the Helpline Center.
And so if you had known our old space, we had no break room. Our refrigerator and coffee pot was next to our phone system, which is not the best setup if you're running a 24-hour phone system. So we are loving our new space and what it's doing for our staff morale, just being in a tough 24/7 environment. So if you're ever in Sioux Falls, feel free to come and see us and check it out in person. But I think that is a key piece as we go into is the Helpline Center serves the state, and that's really important. But almost all of our work is through phone, chat, soon to be chat, not quite yet, hopefully in the next month or so, text and email. And so it's really important that our staff have that working environment to be able to navigate all that different technology. And so when you look in our connection center, you can see 3 monitors on every stand, which is because they're monitoring multiple modes of communication on how people are reaching out to us. And so with that, before we jump in the presentation, is there any questions? And then I'll get this pulled up. All right. All right, so you can see the real like the whole screen slide, right? Not the 2-slide one. Okay, awesome. So we're gonna fly through some of this. And so, as I mentioned, our mission is helping and connecting others. And so last year, we handled 88,000 contacts per se. Really, our phone calls are still the #1 mode that people reach out to us, and then emails and texts. We will be adding chat with 988, which I'll talk about towards the end of the presentation. And out of those, 3,500 of those contacts were suicide related. And when we talk about suicide related, that means they've expressed a plan, thoughts, intent, or the plan is in progress. And I think a key piece to this is sometimes when I'm doing these presentations, there's a thought that like, oh, they say suicide, we automatically call 911. And in reality, last year, 78% of that time, we're able to de-escalate that crisis without involving law enforcement, which we know that outcome is more beneficial for the individual and collaborate with them. And so as the accredited crisis line for South Dakota, and also the accredited line for information referral through 211, our staff are trained. We no longer have volunteers answering the phones. And so, and then when 988 launches, we'll have master level counselors on the phone with master's level degrees, because it's really important that we work to de-escalate that crisis and get them to the appropriate level of care. And so that's a huge piece, especially with working with 911s, is law enforcement are not mental health providers. And so how can we work to allow them to focus on there and then de-escalate and get those individuals to the appropriate level of care. And so as you can see, every suicide related contact is assessed. So we have sort of threatened, planned, in progress. Once again, we work to de-escalate and collaborate, but if someone's life is in immediate danger, we are not afraid to intervene with law enforcement. And we have amazing law enforcement in this in the state that we partner with. And so if someone is not working with us, whether that's safety planning, having buffers, means restriction in their life, we do intervene with law enforcement. Ideally, the individual has reached that realization they need additional help, and they're moving towards that decision with us, but sometimes we do have to intervene without their knowing, depending on the situation, on what's safe to get them the help that they need. So first, part of what we'll do is we'll first talk about mental health overall and some statistics, and then we'll jump into the statistics of suicide and I have no idea why it's doing that, so I apologize. Those are really annoying. So we're just going to click through all of that. So when we talk about mental health, that includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being, affects how we think, feel, and act. It helps us determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. And it's really important that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And just recently, there has been more celebrities, another celebrity suicide in the news, along with some college athletes. And so I just saw a really cool snippet on ESPN of college softball players talking about reaching out. And I think that's so important. The more we can talk about mental health, the more we can break down that stigma that you're not weak if you reach out, because many of us, we all have stress. We all have challenges in our life. We all have those tough days. And so how can I read an article where sometimes we talk more so about mental illness instead of mental fitness. So I really like that change of like, how are you developing your mental fitness? Because it's not about avoiding mental health challenges, because we're going to experience those. There's no way that we can avoid trauma. Last year, I took an advanced trauma informed care class, and I learned so much. And I have a 4 and a 3.5-year-old, and I was like, I need to avoid as much trauma from them as possible. And so I start buying coping skill books for 3-year-olds, and my husband's like, what are you doing? I'm like, we got to teach them the skills, because if they don't, and I realized it's more about how do we teach the skills of resiliency and coping, because it's not that all of us have experienced some type of trauma in our life. And it's how do we move with that trauma and move forward. And so I think I personally want to start using the word mental fitness more, because it's all about how are we building that mental fitness as a community and as individuals. So mental health in South Dakota, there are about 30,000 adults who are living with serious mental health conditions. I say about because there's many undiagnosed individuals, I believe, that are worried about reaching out, don't know how to reach out, don't know how. And so that is one of the goals with 988. There are approximately 9,000 kids living with mental health conditions. And then 48% of adults with mental illness in South Dakota receive some type of treatment, with 51.8 receiving no mental health treatment. So I think that's really important, is the connecting individuals to resources and connecting them with the support that they need to meet them where they're at. And this was, there's the sources down below. And so why is it important to learn? Is they're common. Is that there's a stigma. We don't tell someone with a broken leg, like, oh, pick it up, you'll be fine. But how many times do we tell that someone that is struggling with a mental health condition, like, things will get better, you'll be fine, the sun will come out, instead of acknowledging that pain, that hurt, to say, like, it's okay to reach out for help. There is hope and help out there. Many people are not well informed. And so the more that we can spread the awareness, I know Dodie does QPR, like, equip yourself as professionals, equip yourself with more. Michelle does assist. She's doing a 2-day training for our staff next week. And so mental health first aid. And so I think the more we can get the word out of how do we equip ourselves to understand what mental health is, that we're not afraid to talk about it. And I relate back to, I remember growing up, no one really talked about cancer. It was sort of like, Betsy has cancer, but now we celebrate survivors, we celebrate cancer awareness. And how can we get to that with mental health, where we're celebrating, like, realizing mental health is a part of every day, and not be afraid to say suicide and ask that question and say, are you okay? And so part of that is people don't know how to respond. They don't know, like, should I ask the question, or is that going to make them complete the act tomorrow? And so I think it's getting comfortable with asking the question. And that's what we work with our staff a lot on, is we ask those tough questions. And it's more than not, people are relieved to just be asked the question, say, yes, I am. So that is something as working on how do you respond and not freeze up in that situation when you may be in that situation helping someone. And many times they do not seek help. We live in a state of hardworking, pick your bootstraps up. And I think of my husband in this situation. He oversees a team of 100, mainly males. And we talk a lot about mental health, a lot of people are afraid and don't want to reach out for appearing weak. And that is not the case at all when we connect individuals with resources. So I'm not gonna go through all of these, but I think I'll let you read through them because it's annoying when someone reads something on the PowerPoint screen personally. But mental health problems are actually very common. 1 in 5 American adults experience some form of mental illness in a given year. Children don't experience mental health problems when 50% of mental health disorders begin by the age of 14. And I think that's what's really important is the longer that somebody goes undiagnosed, the harder and harder is to come forward, I feel like, because they think it's normal. They think it's normal. They feel like this. They think they're the only one feeling like this. And so the more that we can teach kids, like, let's talk about feelings. It's okay to talk about feelings to get that support. And then mental health problems are violent and unpredictable. And that's not the case. I think sometimes people, when there are situations like, well, they have a mental health illness and that's why they've been violent. When you look at the research, only 3 to 5% of violent acts can be attributed to individuals with serious mental illness. And I think knowing the facts and knowing the data helps us become more informed of really the situation with that. And Dodie, I'll send this over to you too. I finished it at about 11 o'clock last night. So, and the personality weaknesses or character flaws, it's a myth. It's really biological factors. And I don't know if any of you guys were at it, we brought us a national speaker in April, Dr. Nzinga Harrison. I don't know if any of you guys have heard, she used to have a podcast that's not running right now, but we brought her in through some opioid funding April 20th. And she was phenomenal. She talked about the genetics, how the hereditary factors of addiction or mental health is in there. So I don't want to quote her directly, but she basically said like the inheritance factor of addiction is like 0.39 to 0.6, like 1% is 100% you're going to inherit that. So what she's saying is depending where you land on that, your environmental factors may be 40% or 25%. So you have to protect those environmental factors even more so if you have a higher hereditary of inheriting that. And so she talked about that in her own family with kids. She has a 16 and 15-year-old. She goes, we have schizophrenia, we have bipolar in our, so from before we were even having kids, I was talking to my husband, is we need to build those skills into, because they have a smaller level of impact from environmental factors that someone that has a lower inheritable. So it's new research really looking at that biological factor that was just phenomenal. So I encourage you to look up Dr. Nzinga Harrison. She is based, she is the Chief Medical Officer for Eleanor Health, is her current role. So she was a phenomenal speaker, really talking about the biological factors and the environmental factors that may contribute to mental illness and addiction, and how we're all susceptible to it. And so how do we as individuals create those buffers and connections to handle that when it comes our way. And there's no hope. There is no hope for people with mental health problems is a definite myth. Studies show that people can get better with resources and support and connection. We have a Step Forward to Prevent Suicide Walk every June, and we have an honorary speaker. And so this year, the speaker this year is our first time where we have an attempt survivor. Her name is Megan, and she is sharing her story. And you'll probably see more coming up, but she shared her story with our staff practicing. And so she talked about that fear of not getting better, but she's doing well, but how she finally said what switched it for me was I had to view my psychiatry appointments and my counseling appointments as how I need food and water. And once I accepted that they are just as important as food and water, I was able to move my life forward. And so it's a very cool story. So our walk is June 11th. You can raise money, but it's free to attend. But her story will be shared more on Facebook because she really wants to get that story out of, as an attempt survivor, there is hope, and there is help out there. And so some common warning signs is eating or sleeping too much or too little, withdrawing. I think really being as a professional is being aware of, has there been, there's another slide that's a little bit shorter than this coming up, is being aware of there's changes in that person. But as Megan talked about with our staff on Wednesday, she masked it. She was the happy, she was the kindest, everyone thought she had everything put together. She's like, that was my mask. And so I think looking more into the situation, asking those questions, being vulnerable with the person so they can be vulnerable with you. That was a really key piece, is that vulnerability. I don't know how many of you guys read Brene Brown work, which she's just phenomenal, but also looking beyond what might be on the surface of what might be the obvious thing that you can see, but looking beyond and asking those questions. So things that you can do to be supportive in this work is learn as much as possible about mental health. So these classes is you're stepping forward, learning more, and there's more to learn beyond this. Show interest in your family members or treatment plan. So if someone is going through treatment, ask them, be interested, support them. Listen carefully. I think that's important. Sometimes we like to talk before we listen. And I don't know if anyone has young children. Have you ever heard of the children's book called The Rabbit Listened? It was part of the Dolly Parton Imagination Library book that we received in the mail, and it is phenomenal on teaching kids empathy. And so it's a really fun book about how he built something amazing, it came crashing down, and the bear came, and the bear was, let's yell about it, let's stomp about it. And then the hyena came, let's laugh about it. And the chicken came, let's talk about it. And it goes through this, and then finally, when he felt like he had lost all hope, he didn't realize the rabbit came up next to him and just listened. And the rabbit listened as he wanted to yell. The rabbit listened as he wanted to remember. And then the rabbit was there when he was ready to rebuild something new. And so it is a very cool book that I highly encourage you guys to look up. My daughter can't say the word, she calls it empathy. But we're teaching of empathy, being there, listening, just sometimes not even talking, just that support. So that is a cool book that I would recommend. It's a children's book that is a very, very quick 2-minute read, but there's so much behind the words. And also don't push too hard. I think it's that fine line of being supportive, but they also need to be like, you are not going to force somebody. So how do you recognize that line of supportive, but not adding more guilt to the situation from that perspective? And then prepare for a crisis plan and don't give up. And so we'll talk about your resources, know that you as a helper, and even you, if you're experiencing mental health, you're not alone. So what are those resources, which we'll talk about in a few slides. So moving forward to suicide support services. So what is the Helpline Center? We answer the 1-800-273-8255 number, which is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And other crisis calls do come in on 211. But starting in July, we are so excited. Nationally, the 988 number will be rolled out. So when I do these, obviously you're going to be able to look in the screen, but when I'm speaking to a group, I usually say, can anyone repeat the 1-800 number? Nobody can repeat it, and it's very hard. Yeah, Michelle can repeat it. So this group is some exceptions. Vanessa could repeat it because Vanessa's been working hard with the 988 launch, but typically no one can repeat it. And so that is what's so exciting about 988 is creating an easy 3-digit number for mental health and substance use, and to start that crisis now, that system of care. So we'll talk more about that, but that is coming very quickly in July. We have trained crisis staff, and that with 988, we will now be requiring a master level degrees on that to answer 988. 211, it's important, will not be going away. 211 is really information referral, and there's another slide coming up about that. We also have crisis texting, and with the launch of 988, we will be adding chat and crisis texting. What's so cool is you cannot text just 211. You have to text 898-211, which is hard to remember. You with 988, you will be able to just text 988 without doing zip code and all that kind of stuff. So we will be adding chat and text with that launch in the next month or so. And then we do provide community trainings and programming. So we have staff trained to do mental health, QPR, assist, but there's also amazing trainers in the state. So I highly, highly encourage you to take the next step after you've completed this course and attend some of those amazing trainers and trainings across the state. And then we really see our suicide crisis work as a 3 levels: prevention, intervention, and postvention, because they all intermix. Like in a postvention, you're really doing prevention for that individual who just lost a loved one to suicide. So really we think of it as a stool, because if one is off, the whole system. So prevention, intervention, and postvention. So some national suicide statistics. These are from 2019. It's always a little bit behind. There was 47,511 suicides in the US. So that's an average of 1 suicide every 10.9 minutes. It's a 10th ranking cause of death, but I believe, Michelle, you might have, like, there's new ones coming out pretty quickly. I know with COVID that, I don't know if suicide has changed, but I know COVID jumped up, and obviously since 2020, but do you know any of the most recent ones?
I think it's the 9th ranking.
I think it's up, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then it's a 2nd ranking cause of death for youth, but in South Dakota, it's the 1st ranking cause of death for youth, which is on the next slide. And then 3.6 male deaths by suicide for each female death. What's hard is attempt is hard to track, because you don't always know what an attempt is. But if you look at the statistics, males use more lethal forces typically, where a gunshot to that compared to females. Some say there's more attempts by females, but they don't use as lethal of a plan. So that is it's harder to know the actual attempt statistics because they're not all documented. And so for South Dakota, and so I updated this, there was an addendum out in September of 2021. So we rank 8th among the United States for suicide. So we have a 20.7 rate of suicide per 100,000 residents. And it was the 10th leading cause of death for South Dakota in 2020, leading cause of death for individuals aged 10 to 19. So it's definitely something that we as a community need to be highly concerned about, that's impacting our every age, every sector, every culture, every group in our state. And there was 185 deaths in South Dakota in 2020 with suicide. And so if you look at it, the rate of gender, it follows. One interesting thing for South Dakota is the South Dakota Native Americans are 2.5 times higher than the South Dakota white population for suicide off of the release of 2021. So understanding that cultural impact is a very important piece. In Minnehaha, we just received the 2021 statistics. So the Minnehaha and Lincoln County, we work with the coroner to get these. So it's pretty like all right in that area. I don't think dropping from 40 to 27 means like we need to let up on mental health awareness by any means. I think we need to continue to push the awareness, the work on the breaking down the stigma. So high risk groups, white males, veterans, American Indians, young adults, working males, rural residents. This slide's interesting because I want to say everyone. Like if you really look at it, it's like everyone. We all are at risk. We're depression, like it doesn't matter if you make $5 an hour or $5,000 an hour. Life doesn't discriminate, tough times. And so there's definitely higher risk, but I think all of us need to be realizing it can impact any one of us, and how can we have the tools in our toolkit to respond to that situation. The basic concepts about suicide is most suicide people do not want to die. Suicide people want to find a way to live, and ambivalence exists until that moment of death, and the final decision does rest with the individual. And so when we work with our staff, is if you reduce risk factors, you reduce risk. And if you enhance the protective factors, you will reduce risk. So we'll talk about some calm as access to means. And so our staff, if they are not asking, do you have access to means? That is an immediate feedback retraining with them on the phone to say, you need to be asking, what is your access to means? Because we know that acute crisis where they see no hope, they see no help, it's a short period of time, most likely. So if we can get them out of that acute crisis, and they have to, that the means is not just readily available to them, it helps. And so that is, we'll talk about calm and reducing the access to means that our staff have been trained on. Terminology, I think it's important. This is a new one, and I don't, it just came across, what's those things called that you get every day? News group from AAS. Is completed suicide used to be a politically correct term. They are now saying you rather not use that. So the three terms that nationally they are really promoting us to use is died by suicide, killed themselves, took their own life. Media is horrible at using committed suicide. Your loved one did not commit a crime. They had a medical issue, and so we really, that is one of the first things we stress with staff is we do not use committed suicide. Some people use suicided is also a term. I find it a little awkward, but that is another term. But completed suicide is something that used to be used a lot, and just like it was within the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's because it's completed sometimes means something successful, and suicide isn't a success. And so that's why they're now moving completed to a do not use term. And I think with mental health, also using person first language. I am a person living with depression. And instead of saying the person is bipolar, a person who has bipolar disorder. So just be cognizant of the words you use because it does matter. So when we talk about suicide, we want to recognize the warning signs of that. So feelings, actions, behavioral threats, and situations. And so this can be termed up as the word facts. So this is one acronym. I've referenced QPR. So I really highly encourage QPR, and I really highly encourage assisted mental health first aid training, which will just give you a whole nother level of tools in your toolkit. But today, when you think of facts, think about their feelings: hopeless, helpless, shame, guilt, sadness, anxiety, anger, fear of losing control, worthless. And then that also goes with the actions. Are they talking about death or suicide? If they're talking about that, don't push it under the rug as a joke. We take on the crisis line, if it's a joke or not, we take it seriously, and we're asking the follow-up questions. Don't minimize that, which is another one. Don't minimize, like, you really wouldn't do that. Acknowledge that pain that they're feeling, that they're at that point of thinking that them not being here is better for the world. New or increased substance use, that is a huge use of alcohol or drugs. Aggressive behaviors, giving away possessions like, I don't need this anymore, it's better off with you, is a key thing to watch out for too. And then finding long-term care of pets, making sure that their pets are taken care of, are some actions that people may be if they're having thoughts of suicide. Behavioral changes is withdrawn from friends or family, loss of interest, poor concentration, acting like a different person. And that's both ways. If they're very, very happy and all of a sudden they're very sad, or someone that's very sad and now they're the life of the party. Like, so watch, like, understanding it could go both ways on acting like a different person. Low energy, changes into sleeping habits, sleeping too much, and loss of appetite. So really looking at that whole picture that someone may be feeling, experiencing, and acting. And then threats. All threats should be taken seriously, and they can be considered direct or indirect. So I'm thinking about killing myself as a very direct statement that needs to be taken seriously, but indirect statements such as, I won't be around much longer, everyone would be better off without me. I can't do this anymore. And so really be understanding of listening to what, and don't prejudging or like expecting what they're going to say next. Listen to what they're saying and realizing some can be direct and some can be indirect. And so this is just those key warning signs. So when someone calls the crisis line right now some of this might change. The foundation will stay the same. Is we have 3 questions we automatically ask them on the crisis line is, are you having thoughts of suicide? Have you attempted? And have you lost someone to suicide? Because those 3, how they answer that really increases their risk for suicide. And so I think that those are our 3 initial, but then we start to ask questions of what is their desire, what is their intent, what is their capability, and what is their plan. And I think that's a huge, it's okay to ask, like, when you had those thoughts before, have you thought of a plan? That our staff get very comfortable with asking those tough questions. And so that is very important that you're recognizing that and asking those follow-up questions if they've made direct or indirect statements or other warning signs that you've witnessed with the individual. And so I've talked a lot. Are there any questions? And I see the chat. I'm sorry, it's up there. Oh, who is now the care coordinator? That was from an hour ago. So I apologize. And so right now we've had Tina Ryder is our mental health program support manager who you'll work with. She oversees. So we have a main one, Brooke, but then Chelsea and Shay also help. So you will meet her. She's part of Assist. And then Madison, what cities is that in reference to the lift? Yeah. So it's available wherever Lyft is available. So we will definitely try to schedule a Lyft ride. But we can't come more, if you're in a more rural area, it's a little bit harder because those lifts aren't always available.
Okay. Yeah, Michelle kind of asked you. It was about the DoorDash thing. And then I couldn't find my mouse to unmute myself. So sorry.
Oh. Are there any other questions? Sort of a heavy topic for a Friday, but it's an important one. And so I've talked about CALM, and this is a training that our staff have to use. It's counseling on access to lethal means. And so it's very important that we understand. So for example, 25% of teens stated it was less than 5 minutes between the time they decided on a suicide and their attempt. So like part of like when we ask about means is how can we, in that 5 minutes, when they see no hope and they see no reason for living, if we can get them out of that 5 minutes because they don't have access, we have a chance to connect and to build those resources. So, and those supports. And so that's what's really important is the harder it is and there's more protective factors, the more chance we can get to them and to connect and get them resources. And so 13% said 24 hours or more went by. And so we have and 1 in 3 youth suicides followed within 24 hours of crisis. So it's not, we have to realize like the harder it is to get to the means, the more protected, that's another layer of protective factors to get them out of that acute crisis and get them support and the help that they need. 85 to 90% of gunshot wounds resulted in death. And so that lethal means that guns are more lethal than overdoses, but they're both still need to be taken very seriously. And 1 to 2% of overdoses or cutting resulted in death. And so that is, we recently had a booth at the gun show with the Suicide Prevention Task Force, and Chelsea Schmidt, who's on our staff, I think it was our first year doing it. She was a little bit nervous going there, but she had the best experience and loved how people were coming up to them, because it's not that we're anti-gun, we're pro-gun safety. And that's like a key thing, is to say, like, if you have someone high risk, like, use gun locks, get them locked up. So it's not an anti-gun message, it's a pro-gun safety message of when we're talking about access to lethal means. And I think that, like, it was so fun to watch her come back and feel re-energized that I think she thought that people would just be at a gun show, like be coming after them. But people are like, no, we need to be gun safe. And so that's a key piece that we really talked. It's not anti-gun, it's pro-gun safety to keep people safe. And then we also have, oh, sorry, my mouse went crazy. You can't find your mouse and my mouse is going crazy, Madison. And so 1/3 of our households in the US have guns. 85% of guns used in youth suicide come from home, and 9 of 10 people who attempt suicide and survive will not die by suicide later. So how to make access to guns difficult is the gun lock, gun cabinet, unload ammo, hide ammo in a separate location, take other parts of the gun that are not working, and best option, find temporary storage away from where that person is living day to day. So there is a really cool thing, a brochure, and I don't know, Michelle, do you like creating your safe plan or a house safe? Dodie and Michelle, do you know what I'm talking about?
I have some in the PRC. Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't.
That we have some too, actually.
I think that, just one second, if you don't. Here we go. I should have had that ready, but this is an amazing, it's how to safeguard your home. And so it talks about even medication lock boxes. So this is another thing, like from a calm perspective, okay, let's get you a medication lock box. Sometimes parents will call and they're worried about like their teen or an older adult. We're like, okay, where's the medication? Let's get that locked up, just as much as locking the guns up. So this is a really cool brochure. We have more if people need them to help out, but it's also available on our website, or we can text out. So this is something we're texting out to parents a lot, is how to safeguard their home if they're concerned about a loved one, teen or older adult, or a third party or whatever. So calm does not only mean guns, it means overall medication, guns, anything. When you know their plan, then figure out what does that means to try to make that as difficult as possible if they explain that plan to you. And so connecting to resources. So if you're concerned of someone you know has experienced suicidal thoughts, ask directly about suicide. Take all the talk of suicide seriously. It's not a joke. Show you care and be supportive. And then listen in a non-judgmental way. And then remember, you don't have to go through this alone. So what I want to do is transition to a little bit of a demo of our website so you know where the resources are that's at your fingertips. And so there are, so let me exit out of this. So a few resources that I highly encourage is, one, the Helpline Center website, which we'll go over today, but there's also the SD suicide prevention. Oh, can you see it? Can you see our website again?
I see Firefox right now. Is that what we're supposed to see?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. So, so the other website that we won't talk about today that I know, Vanessa, are you the one that works on this one now?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. So I encourage you, this is a great resource that Vanessa works on from the state side, is sdsuicideprevention.org. So there's a lot of resources on here that you can dive into and read to your heart's content and educate yourself. But today I want to focus more on the Helpline Center resources that we have. So when we talk about resources, what powers a lot of our programs is, one, obviously our amazing staff 24/7, but the centralized resource database of over 5,000 programs of government, social service, but also mental health providers as well. So when you go on here right now, it will get a little bit of a facelift come July, but all the same components will be there. So I'm excited about that. Is if you go under 211 right now and you go to find help, it's social service and it's very complicated. And you guys likely understand it, but once in a while I'll do a presentation to a business and I talk about food. Like, food is pretty easy. We're coming up on lunch, seems pretty black and white. But when they call into the Helpline Center, food takes a whole nother level of complexity. Because when you go over here, are they SNAP? Are they WIC? Is it grocery delivery because they don't have transportation? Is it food pantry? do they need a meal site because they want the social interaction because they're lonely? And I think that's a key piece, is understanding. The same thing with financial assistance is rent deposit is very different than rent payment, and not everybody offers that. So looking at, so all those resources. So when a resource comes into the Helpline Center, we first ask the geographic location because it's important to get resources in your area. So when you do search, we first ask the zip code, because it's not helpful to give you a resource in Mobridge if you're living in Mitchell. And so that's how it first goes. And then you can start to break it down. So how many of you have ever experienced someone who said, I don't have a cell phone or a data plan? Well, I am so excited. So we're going to show you what's in this resource. Is under financial assistance, there is now called a discounted telephone service. Anyone 200% above poverty or can apply for this affordable connectivity plan. They can get a smartphone per household, and it paid for at least, right now I think it's 2 years, but now it's saying it's going to go out 5 years. So if you click on Cricket Wireless or Selectel are providing this, that have approved their listings with us. Cricket Wireless does have sites across the state. So if you have a Cricket Wireless in your area, right now we only have the Sioux Falls ones listed, but we're working on getting the other ones. So what happens is when you go into the program, it talks about the affordable connectivity plan, steps to the enroll. So visit the national verifier. We have the eligibility, we have the fees, we have the application process, and we have the required documents. And so part of it, it's very frustrating if you tell someone to go visit Bo and they take off work and they go to Bo and Bo's like, well, you needed your photo ID and you needed your social security card. So you got to reschedule another appointment. So they have to go back, take off work. So that is all this information, our database, we get it from the program itself. It's there, it's the program's information. So the more they give us, the more we can share. And so this format is in all the programs that they have given us to share. And then over here, we have like the address and the contact information as well on the type of program you're looking for. Some really cool things from when we relaunched our website last November is we really took feedback from partners like you to say, hey, we really wish it could do this. So a few features, I don't know if you guys noticed, but over here is this. One of our #1 requests is we need it translated. You could translate programs, but it was about 7 clicks in and it was annoying. So now it's on the homepage. We now can translate into 9 different languages. So let's say you're working with someone that speaks Ukrainian, you do Ukrainian and the entire website switches through the Google Translate app or something. And so that, or Espanol or Nepali. So these are the 9 we currently have. We have had some requests that Google does not support. So one request that we've had is the Lakota language, and Google, there's not enough written historical documentation of the Lakota language for them to be able to accurately translate it. So they're not able to do that one. The other one that I've been requesting for 5 years, but obviously Google does not listen to me, but I will continue, is some will say the Karen language or the Karen language. So for those in the Huron and Aberdeen area, they usually request that. So we're not able to translate that one. And then the DSS Office of Economic Assistance in Sioux Falls asked for the Kunama language, and they don't support the Kunama language right now. So if you have other languages you're working with, we continue to request. So I think we originally launched with 7 and we've added a couple more, but those are the 3 that we've gotten requests for that they don't support. But the language thing is a very cool to empower. If you're working with someone that English is not their native language, or maybe they're taking it home to someone that doesn't speak English, you can print those resources out. The other thing that we asked is like to say, well, I want a resource, I go to the same resource over and over and over. Well, our database, I call it a living thing. We are updating it every single day. And so we used to make a lot of PDFs. The problem is the minute you make a PDF, that update is not happening. So now we've created a function called My List. So over here, you can say add to my list. And if you click on that, we'll ask you for your email address. As long as you don't clear your cookies, it will stay in your email, and you hit submit. And You can go to it right away, but I'm going to close it to show you guys something. Up here, if you notice, all of a sudden there's another menu item. That is my list. So what this has done, it's basically my favorites. So this saves all of my favorite things that I can come back to, but it's then when I come back to it, it's automatically going to pull the most recent update that we've made to the database. And so over time, like you can tell where I've sort of done, obviously the ACP plan I'm talking about a lot, but then what you can do is also hit print list. So maybe in your field, you feel like you're constantly talking about 5 resources, you can add them to your list and then you can print it into a PDF. The translation also carries over to the PDF if you have it translated. So that is a cool thing. The other thing that's really cool is you can do my saved categories. And this will pull all the resources from the zip code you saved it on. So for example, medication disposal in the Watertown area, I can hit this and it's going to pull all the options in the Watertown area for medication disposal and you can print out. So how you do a saved search is if we go back to the find help page, is you go here, let's go to suicide prevention and support. Let's say you're looking for suicide attempt survivor resources and you click on this, and this, I shouldn't have done that because it needs to be statewide, our program, but you can hit save the search right here. So if there's no resources for that zip code, it's gonna show that. If you put so if we change it back to 57105, it will show the resources in that area or Front Porch Coalition in the Black Hills area. So that is how you do your save search, which is a huge thing, a huge added. That was one of our top feedbacks. Over here, back to the special categories, we have 18 different categories. So we have mental health. And so we have licensed credentialed therapists in here. And so that's how we broke it out on like, not every therapist offers a different. So if you're, what type of counseling are you specifically looking for? We also have substance use or addiction broken out on those type of services. And then we broke out support groups separately. So here's all the different support groups. So if you're looking for a divorce support group and you don't, and if you want to know what state, here's a little trick. People don't know this unless you're at a training. You can type statewide and it will pull every resource in the database. So that is your insider information for listening for 2 hours. So if you do like divorce support group and you do statewide, it will pull every divorce support group in the state. We're working on another filter to be able to like select telehealth, but it might not be. Telehealth is in here. If we go back to, we have a telehealth guide somewhere. I think it's on another screen, but we can't filter by telehealth right away, but we're working on that right now. So I encourage you to look at the different categories, but it tries to break it down. The other thing is special populations. This is groups of individuals in a population with resources only serving that population. So for example, if you're working with someone as a veteran, these are veteran specific programs. So sometimes people are like, well, we need food in there. Well, a food program is open to all. So that's up in the food resource. So the special populations are for resources like only for that specific population. So like seniors, we have food sites in there because they're senior food sites. So that is how our guided search works. Are there any questions with those resources? And so then the other thing that resource guides is a new one that, so this is what we're redoing. We used to make a bunch of PDFs. So we had a mental health provider guide, we had a behavioral health, all in PDFs. Well, people change jobs, they leave organizations, hours change. And so we were constantly struggling with keeping this PDF updated. So we are making a real-time create your own guide. So for example, we launched it in February, so we're continuing to add and expand to it. But you can click here. And what we've done is we've created a templated guide. So for example, if you're looking for transportation or mental health or a resource guide, you can build your own. So I'm gonna just not put South Dakota because the larger the geographic area, the longer it takes to pull all the resources. So let it spin a little bit if you're really trying to pull a lot. But if you do a mental health resource guide, then you can pick what categories you want. So like if you only want individuals who are faith-based, or if you only want therapists who've said I'm trauma-informed counseling, you can do that. And then you can create a smaller guide of only faith-based providers in that area. So that is a brand new feature we just launched a couple months ago. So there's more to come with this, but please play around with it, give us feedback, because we want our site to be as useful and helpful to you on the field. And so that's what we're really, with the whole revamp we did, was took a lot of feedback on what would be the best use and help for you guys. Any questions? And that was under create your own guide for right now. The other real, I think, hidden thing that I like a lot, because it was a small idea that has just grown, is help sheets. Help sheets we started about 5 years ago as a topic-based information. So I call these really your broken record talks. So you repeat yourself so much. And so it was actually from our staff on the front line saying, people call in and we want to give them information, but it's a lot of information. They can't write it down. And we don't just want to say, call the health department or call whatever. And so this is what we might talk about the situation, and we say, well, let's send you a link with some more information of what we talked about. So can anyone guess? I'll get them all up. We have about 40 active ones right now. Can anyone guess what was our first help sheet that started down this road? It's on the screen. One of them is on the screen. Food resources? Close. Food was like number 2 or 3, Michelle. It was actually bed bugs. We were getting a lot of calls on bed bugs, and our staff were like, we want to give them more than just say, call your local health department. So our staff researched bed bugs, and then the rest of our staff forever was like this walking around. But so like, what is a bed bug? Sources of bed bugs, preventing bed bugs, reporting bed bugs, and treating bed bugs. And then this is where you would find the actual resource. So that's what started this whole thing, was bed bugs. And Dodie, someone else guessed that in another group, they said bed bugs. And so that's what started. And then we cite everything. And that's what started the whole thing. So now we have basic needs. So affordable renting, housing, eviction, food resources, rent calendar, rent calculator, and then mental health. And so we'll get questions of that. People will be like, well, what is the process for IVC? And that it's scary. So now our staff can talk about the IVC process, but then send this out to recap what we just talked about. Let me text you a link so you can you absorb it. So as professionals, feel free to print these, because the other thing that people don't realize is the IVC process for mental health is different than the IVC process for substance use. And so going through those two and helping support staff, and so a lot of these have come from meetings like this saying, hey, can you do this? Or can you research this topic? So these are not, they don't list the actual resource. They're more of like a how-to help sheet on topics that we're explaining a lot. So we do have the mental health one. So safety planning guide and safeguarding your home. So here's that brochure that I talked about right there. So you can print that off if you like. It might not be in a nice silvery sheet of paper, but we can send you some if you want that. And so the other ones that might be really helpful depending on your background is these were the special topics, creating an email account without a phone number. This was requested by a librarian. So we had this made before the pandemic. During the pandemic, in November of 2020, this got 30,000 hits on Google. So what that showed was people were typing into Google and no one talked about the process. Because overnight, if you didn't have an email, you couldn't apply for anything. It was slowly happening, but the pandemic just switched the light off. So this was one that is highly used. Another one that we use a lot is getting an ID when you lost all forms of ID. So quiz question, I don't know how many we're on, number 4. What, if you lost all forms of your ID, what ID should you replace first? If you want to do it the most efficient way. Social Security card? It's actually your birth certificate. So you want to replace your birth certificate first, then you want to go to your driver's license and then do Social Security card last, from the research that our staff did. So sort of that is to help streamline that process. So that's another real common one that a lot of our, and then like steps to changing your name, replacing important papers and documents are all different how-tos that our staff have developed. So help sheets just take, they continue to grow, but we really want, I really call them, I don't think marketing liked it where I'm like, they're the broken record conversations that we're tired of explaining over and over. And now how can we support that conversation? So we settle on help sheets, but I say broken record off the record. So those are under resources as well. And then finally, before we jump back into the presentation with the time, we do, if you're a numbers person, all of our data is actually uploaded to our website every month. And so you can see like for the since January 1 to April 30th, we've taken 28,000 contacts between calls, emails, and texts. So this is feeding data in from 211 NSPL, and then we also answer the SD COVID-19 line, which we're not taking many calls on that anymore. So if you are a data person, here is an overview. So then you can see those main categories. And so we've taken 5,600, identified 5,600 needs for rent payment. An interesting thing that reinforces the complexity of what's happening is if you look at, we've done 28,000 contacts, but we've identified 44,000 needs. And so what that shows, like even I would say 4 years ago, it was very close. And now it's like this. People calling are having many more issues than there's just complex. And so our staff might identify food, but then something else may come up. And one time I was at a presentation and someone said, well, Betsy, why can't you Google this? And I said, well, if you Google, I'm hungry, what pops up? The McDonald's, the closest restaurant. It doesn't pop up the small food pantry that's the third Wednesday, but it doesn't have a human empathy connection. Oh, that must be tough. How else can I help you? And I think that's the power is we all live and die by technology, but more than ever, we need that human connection, whether that's through phone, whether that's through text, that we're real people, we're South Dakotans answering. And that's what I think is so huge of all the services that we're provided is that human connection. We all use technology, but how can we do that human connection? So over here is all you can do. That is awesome. You use this in presentations. We will revamp it a little bit with 988, but feel free to keep using it till we revamp it. So you can do crisis, then you can break it down by county or by the larger cities in South Dakota. And then geographies, you can break down the first page by county or the larger cities. So here are some other things, but so you can definitely see what happened right here, where we went from 186 phone calls to 234 to 579 in a day. March of 2020, does anyone know what happened there? The pandemic, overnight. And then, so we took about 120. Before the pandemic, we were taking about 3,000 to 4,000 calls a month. During the pandemic, we averaged 6,000 to 9,000 calls a month. Our largest month was in November of 2020, where we did 15,000 phone calls. I never want to relive that month ever again. But our staff did amazing and we made it. We are now back to about 5 to 6. So we've reached a new level. And I think that's the silver lining of the pandemic is people learned about and are they're reaching out, which I think that's important. Does anyone know what happened this day? March 29th, 2021. We took 1,400 calls in a 24-hour period. The news reported that it was the end of the eviction moratorium, which was not correct. Anyone from the Rapid City area? The Schroeder fire? So that's another role that the Helpline Center plays in a time of disaster. We work with the emergency management team to keep 911 lines open. So that was a Schroeder fire. That was so close to the city with the evacuations and road closures. So that's always my little trivia game, because people will ask like, what's that spike? But so this data is available as well. Yeah, it was a very scary 24 hours. I was up all like, okay, where is it going next? But it was a really cool partnership with everybody involved to respond to that. So that is our data side. Any questions with our website before we jump back into survivor services and 988? Anyone need like a 5-minute break? You guys hanging in there? All right. So I'm going to close this out. And Dodi, I mentioned our app. Yes, so we do have an, you mentioned our app. So we do have an app. Our app, we are very excited about it. Is only the resources. So I think that's a huge piece. It's awesome, but there's no like connection back to us through that. So it's only the resource database, and it's very similar to our website. There's a few tweaks on the website that will get the app updated, but it's very similar and it has all of our resources. So we're pretty cool to offer that option as well. So I'm gonna go up. Okay, so so we've talked about like the prevention and encouraging you to take additional trainings, and then the intervention is really for us is that crisis work on the text and the phone. And then that third wheel is that post-vention, when someone loses a loved one to suicide. And so when you hear suicide survivor, we identify that as someone who has lost a loved one to death by suicide. And so this is, there was a study that came out and they said on average, there are 6 blood relatives directly affected by each suicide. But we know there is many, many more. And so that is an area that it's important that we support those survivors through that grief, because suicide grief is very different than other grief. And so at the Helpline Center, we have, sorry, these got out of order. So you're like, what is going on, Betsy? We have different ways that we support the survivors. One is we have support packets. And so when a suicide happens, we are able to send a packet of information. There's these little purple books about suicide grief. There's resources for children, there's our resources, and we can send that out across the state. So if you are thinking like, I know someone that needs one of these packets, and we also will provide follow-up phone calls if the survivor wishes. And so those support packets are a very sometimes we've heard stories where they got it, but they weren't able to look at it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but they knew that support was available. We also have a Surviving After Suicide monthly support group. Right now, there is a virtual option. We have suspended it. We are going through a staff transition with the grief services. And so right now it's in person at the Helpline Center in Sioux Falls. That is open, so anyone can come to the monthly support group. We also have a Surviving After Suicide class, which is 9 to 10 week curriculum class talking about the suicide loss. We use a book from Dr. Alan Wolfelt, if anyone has heard of him, is the book that we use to walk through that grief class. That is a closed class. And so our survivor suicide staff person works with that individual to make sure they're ready for the class, but that is a closed 9 to 10 week class. Our next class will start in September, and that is in Sioux Falls as well for right now. We also have a newsletter that we provide quarterly to survivors, just talking and giving them additional resources, giving them additional support. Another, I think, cool thing that is very supportive is carrying cards. So we have survivors make cards. So I am not crafty, but some other people are amazingly crafty. So survivors will make cards and then we'll handwrite like, thinking about you on this day must be tough, when we might send it out on the loss of their loved one, or maybe on the birthday of their loved one, to know like, we're thinking about you, we're here for you, your loved one has not been forgotten. And I think that's one of the things that we talk about it with Surviving After Suicide is use the person's name. So many survivors want to talk about their loved one, and it's okay. Like, and so tell me more about Bob. Tell me what he loved. And that's okay. Like, use their name, celebrate their life. And that is part of that caring cards, is to remind them that we're still thinking about their loved one. And we're thinking about that this day may be pretty tough. So our caring cards. We also have the loss program, which I'll talk about. And this is primarily in the Minnehaha and Lincoln County area. And then children and teen survivors. We do support children and teen survivors. Right now, a lot of that is on request. So for example, a couple of years ago, a youth sports team lost a teammate to suicide. And so we worked with them to provide support. We recently were at a church where they lost someone in a youth group. And so we went out to that church youth group and provided resources and support. So that, and then, or if there's a suicide at a school, they might reach out for some support packets, some other information. And so the children and the teen survivors right now, it's really on demand per se, for a specific, like when a specific request comes in from a certain situation. And so our loss team works with, we work with several law enforcement agencies in the Minnehaha and Lincoln County, where when a suicide has happened, the detective on the scene can call us with permission of the family to relay that information and offer that family, should they go out in person. So our staff will go out in person if the family requests, or we'll call them the next day to support them. More and more, they're at, like, we call them the next day. We don't go out on scene as much as we used to. But the detectives, it's really making sure that they feel connected right away and helping just ease any little thing we can help with. So our survivor Jenny, services person Jenny, talked about how one time a family member, they were in a different state when the suicide happened, and they were so distraught. And she's like, I need to go find their body at the county. I don't even know who to call. So like, we got the number, we texted, say, here's the number. Like, don't worry about finding it. Here's the number. So those are some of those like immediate support services that we just try to provide and immediate to be there and help ease any of that ease some of that burden and pain that they're feeling at the time. So I'm going to go up here because I didn't realize these were out of order. And so when you're working with a survivor, it's important to accept the intensity of the grief. Listen with your heart, avoid cliches or simplistic explanations. Respect the need to grieve, understand the uniqueness of suicide grief, and then be aware of the support groups that are available. And so whether you're in the Sioux Falls area where we have that in-person support group in class, if you're outside of the state, please don't hesitate to connect, because we can look for what's in their area, or we can provide telephone support as well, because it is a different type of grief. And that's one of the things that we hear so often from survivors, is they feel like they're the only ones in this situation, that nobody can understand what I'm feeling. And talking with other survivors and connecting with other survivors really brings that hope and that healing, realizing that life will never be the same, but there is a path forward through hope and healing and remembering their loved one. And so I think that's also the terminology that we talked about. So a survivor of suicide is someone who has lost a loved one. An attempt survivor, or someone with lived experience, is someone who has survived a suicide attempt. And so just clearing that up, that when you hear suicide survivor, that doesn't mean they survived suicide. Attempt survivor is the language for that case. And then someone who lost someone to suicide is a suicide survivor. Any questions with that? I think also it's important to recognize your self-care in all of this. So we are in the helping field, and we hear a lot of stories, and we take that on ourselves. So understanding and making sure you're aware of how you're processing that and feeling that. So don't be afraid to reach out for help. Talk, find a confidant, but that's really important, is you understand that secondary trauma is real when you hear about all these stories and connections. And so be cognizant as a helper that you also need to make sure that you have your supportive pieces in place to support you in this very tough but rewarding work that we do. Sorry, the tornado sirens are going off, if you can hear that in the background. So before we jump into the next phase to mental health access, is there any questions or? Have you learned something new? One thing new? Okay, that's good. If you can take one nugget back, I consider it a success. So I guess I could put Vanessa on the spot and say, Vanessa, it's sort of we've started the pony show of explaining 988. So we are so excited to really, we are in an innovative transformational time for mental health and substance use with the launch of 988. And so what this will be, behavioral health crisis in South Dakota is going to be changing with this launch. And I think it's really important that it's again, not just the phone number, it's the whole system of care. And so there is a short video that I want to play for us that starts to introduce it. Oh no, Vanessa's doing the same thing it did to us the other presentation.
Can you
It is a
right
great
click on
video.
your screen and say open hyperlink?
Do this one. I'll go here.
Yeah, and hit open hyperlink. Working on mine.
Here we go. Oh, I'm glad my YouTube is up to date.
Imagine for a moment that a fire breaks out in your home, and in this reality, 911 doesn't exist. You might call the fire department directly, but they're not equipped to come to your location and only put out fires at the fire station. And the only people that will come to you in the community are the police, who, though well-intentioned, are meant to provide a very different type of public service. This lack of a fire-specific response seems ridiculous, right? Of course we should have targeted services to respond to life-threatening emergencies, whether that's fire, law enforcement, or physical health. However, in many communities across America, life-threatening mental health and substance use crises are treated as an afterthought, receiving a response that's not specific to their unique needs. A 911 call dispatches the police, who most often bring the patient to a medical emergency room or jail, or allow them to remain in the community but without assessment, treatment, or support. We have a patchwork system made up of elements designed for other purposes that doesn't have the capacity to treat the most vulnerable in our communities, even though an estimated 20 to 25,000 individuals in crisis go to emergency departments every day in the US. So how can we improve? The only solution to delivering crisis care worthy of our communities is to build a structure specifically for mental health, substance use, and suicidal crisis that is on par with other emergency systems, like we do for medical, fire, and law enforcement. By integrating 3 core elements, we can replace the patchwork fabric of our crisis care and develop a true safety net that can serve everyone, everywhere, every time. And in the process, we can reallocate wasted financial resources to places where they can have a deep community impact. It starts with regional or statewide crisis call hubs. Call, text, and chat lines staffed by trained professionals who answer the call every time and direct people to the level of care they need. The onset of 988 is a great start. However, it will need to be supported by technology that empowers 988 to become an air traffic control for mental health and substance use crisis, enabling real-time coordination across the care spectrum. But a comprehensive crisis network cannot be built with only crisis call hubs. Additional services are necessary to ensure that a unified system of care is available when and how people need it. Services like mobile crisis outreach teams, 24/7 non-law enforcement mobile teams that go out in the community and deliver care to people wherever they are. This lessens the burden on law enforcement during situations where they're not needed and eliminates the anxiety people feel when a uniformed officer knocks on their door. And facility-based crisis receiving and short-term stabilization, Facilities that say yes to every person that walks through the door, regardless of their level of need, allowing them to bypass the medical emergency departments. This not only provides specialized care to these individuals with less waiting, it also enables medical emergency departments to focus on the patients they're trained to serve, while drastically reducing wall time for police when transportation by police is warranted. With these core elements in place, mental and substance use healthcare can move out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Together, we can build an unbroken system of care that connects patients from the point of crisis to the level of care that's right for them. To learn more, visit crisisnow.com.
And so that's really the,
Today, the air traffic control model
watching
and its
another video.
principles have led to it being
1 second.
remarkably safe for us to fly.
we're
Using
gonna
those
stop the
same
screen share so I can figure out where that's happening.
and a focus on never losing grip of the person in distress, crisis call center.
Okay, here we go. We're back at it now. And so I'm going to go back one slide. And so how the process and the partners is really it's multiple pieces in place to do that. So the 988 call center, which will be answered by the helpline, but how do we involve 988 dispatch? What is the law enforcement? So someone to respond. So the 3 pillars is someone to call, someone to respond, and somewhere to go. And so that is what Vanessa and the DSS team is working on, the other pieces, and we're working on that 988, that someone initially to call. And so it will be the first ever 3-digit dialing code for suicide prevention and mental health to call, chat, or text. And until then, they should continue to call the 1-800-273 number, which will be what's really exciting, or not exciting, but reassuring is, let's say you say, well, I have that number all over the place. Like, how that number is still going to be answered. On the back end, a 3-digit number has to be pointed to a 1-800 number. So whether they call 988 or 1-800-273-TALK, it will still get into the 988 crisis hub, wherever they're calling from across the nation. So I think that's a key piece, is you don't have to start running around like, where's all this number? Because that will still be able to be answered. And so the fast facts about it is we want to get greater access to free, confidential, life-saving services to those experiencing emotional distress, substance use, beyond reaching that acute level of a suicide crisis. How can we get the people reaching out before they get to that high level crisis level? It will not replace the NSPL line, but strengthen it and expand it. It's easy number to remember. And how do we strengthen that larger crisis care system? So when this number was decided, the conversation really started happening 2 to 3 years ago on the national level, is there was a lot of research done on what 3-digit number to use. And they specifically chose 988 because they want 988 to be as well known as 911. And so that's why they wanted it to be one of a 9 number instead of another 11 number. And all the 11 numbers have actually been used for something. So they didn't want to try to remarket a 11 number. And so that should be one of the trivia is, do we all know what the 11 numbers stand for? But so all the 11 numbers have already been taken for something. So they didn't want to like reuse a 11 number. And so I shared the story at a presentation on Tuesday, I think, with Vanessa and I asked my daughter, she's 4.5, to say, what's 911? Because I'm like, I need to start teaching her that. She knows how to unlock my phone. And she said, oh, Mom, that's how you call to get the ambulance or the police officer or the helicopter or the firefighter. I was like, hey, that's actually a pretty good explanation. And so I said, well, what's 988? She looks at me and I said, well, that's going to be a number that you can call if you're feeling sad. And that is a very, very, very high level explanation. But it really hit home for me, is like, that's really the dream, is if we want to turn mental health stigma and reach out, is I want a 4-year-old to be able to know 988 as quickly as they know 911, like moving forward. And so that's like, I get goosebumps when I just had that realization as I was fighting with her on how to put her shoes on, is I want her to be able to know that it's okay to reach out for help, just as much as if your house is on fire, it's okay to call 911, and you should. And so that's really like my new like driving motivation. It just was a light bulb for me moment on Tuesday morning. And so what's a key piece to remember is that 211 and 988 serve two very different important roles. And so in South Dakota, what's interesting is the Helpline Center, we're a blended center. So we answer and we're accredited for both numbers, and that's not typical in other parts of the nation. And so there are some huge benefits for that. Is on 988, we know when someone's in a mental health crisis, there's going to be social needs involved most likely as well. Food, what is that stress? And our mental health counselors on 988 will have access to that database to say, you know what, let's get you some food to the door, but let's keep working on this crisis that we're working on. And so 211 will really be for information, referral, government services, social services. 988 is those crisis situations, emotional distress, suicide, behavioral health, substance use information, connection to all levels of treatment options, and then the care coordination and follow-up. And so that is one piece as well, is right now on the NSPL line, we do offer follow-up. It might be 24 hours after the call to make sure that they're following through with what we discussed. But with 988 is we're taking that follow-up to the next level. It might be 5 follow-ups to say, did you call? Did you? Oh, you didn't? Let's get you. How do you do that? And then long-term, as we build this crisis now system, is to have a seamless integration. So can we actually schedule the appointment at the community mental health center for them? Can we see inpatient beds to get them to where they need to be? And so that is all the vision of how do we build this system out. And so this, my mouse went over here. So like very easy, if when you've got a police, fire, or rescue, you call 911. When you need social service information and resource, you call 211. And when you have an urgent mental health need, you call 988. Is really the new marketing going forward when it's launched in July. And I apologize, some of the logos did not go across. So the DSS logo should be down here. So I don't know why I didn't copy over, but so 988 in South Dakota will be answered by the Helpline Center and be staffed with individuals with advanced degrees or experience in behavioral health. So we're currently in that ramping up stage right now. We have 2 confirmed, and we hopefully will have 2 or 3 more confirmed today. So we have hired a clinical director, we've hired a 988 QA and training manager, we've hired a mental health counselor outreach to help us with that outreach to 911s and community mental health and other providers. And then I've talked about supporting follow-up calls and mobile crisis team integration, discharges from inpatient units. So really connecting the dots and connecting the system. And then the other one is we'll be partnering with 911 and PSAP. So right now we currently have a pilot going with 911 Metro. Many of these calls are going to 911 right now. And we know if they call, and 911 is not trained for mental health crisis. And so they are now transferring some calls to us where we are able to de-escalate that situation without doing law enforcement. So it's going really, really well with Metro. We're learning a lot. And so eventually all 33 PSAPs will reach out to figure out how can we get, and then ultimately the hope is marketing. People will naturally call 988 first before calling 911. Amy at Metro, we joke that they're the black and white and we're the warm and fuzzy, because they had to get to the next call where we can spend 15 to 20 to 30 minutes working on de-escalation, coping skills, and then saying, okay, what's the next level of care that you need? And so with that, we're right at 11:15. That is a very brief overview. You'll be starting to see more 988 presentations, but I didn't want to miss an opportunity to talk about it. Are there any questions? Awesome. And so I just want to end with this short video that we made last fall on Suicide Prevention Week in September.
Pain is real, but so is hope.
While there is life, there is hope.
Hope is stronger than fear.
Hope fuels us with energy and courage to move forward.
Hope is seeing the light in spite of being surrounded by darkness. Hope. Hold on. Pain ends.
Once you hope, anything is possible.
So with that, I want to say thank you. It's been a pleasure. And I certainly will answer any questions that you may have about the Helpline Center or 988. It's great we have Vanessa with us as well to answer any of those questions too.
Well, I just want to thank you. There was a couple times during your presentation, you know, I know you were there to provide resources, but I got goosebumps, like just with all the information, the resources that are available and the video at the end. And so I just thank you for the work that you're doing and sharing with us.
Well, you are very welcome. And I love working at the Helpline Center because we want to support you as much as we're supporting individuals. And so anything that we can help with, don't be afraid to reach out. A lot of the resources and ideas have come from people saying, hey, try to do this. And so that's what's really cool. So thank you so much for all the work that you do. We love being in the place we are to connect and provide and get people back to the amazing resources in our community.
Question, Betsy, too. I love all you guys do, and we use like volunteer connections and things a lot. And my agency is joining the Helpline Center network of care.
Yeah.
Could you touch on that a little bit? Because once we get them out of crisis, I think it'll be really neat for agencies to be able to connect and refer kind of on the back end.
Yeah. So what agency are you with? I'm guessing you're in Brookings or Watertown.
Yeah, in Brookings with the Volunteer Service Bank.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, so that's what I touched on very, very briefly is the Helpline Center Network of Care and then the Community Information Exchange. And so the Helpline Center Network of Care is a whole person care coordinated social service system, realizing that we, to better serve individuals, we have to be able to connect the dots. So the best way I can explain the network of care is think of your medical record. When you go to the ER and they're like, hey, you got to follow up with your family practice provider, you go there, they can see what happened. And so the network of care is building that social service record so the burden is not on the person to remember who they've talked to, what they're waiting for, and to start closing the loop. And that's really the next level. Is right now, I was at a conference 5 years ago, and there was a speaker that said a person in crisis is a really bad historian, but our systems are set up to make the person in crisis remember, well, where did you go? What did they say? What do you need? What are you waiting for? Oh, you need your rent agreement. And that's how our systems have been set up. So we need to flip that model by creating social systems of care. And then, so the network of care, we have grant funding to expand this to Watertown and Brookings. And it's been in Sioux Falls for about 5 years, but it's taking a whole new level of approach. I think the pandemic is really realizing we cannot operate in silos to support those individuals and closing the loop. So, because one of the challenges like right now on 211 is we provide resources, but we don't know if they actually get there. And so do they call? Do they not? So that's like, how do we, like you have the half circle that we know we got them the resources, but how do we create the bottom circle? And that is what the network of care is doing. And then being able to share case notes. And I think sometimes we're not, some of our agencies maybe, but HIPAA, people say, well, like, we can't do this with HIPAA. But I think if you really look at HIPAA, and I know the lawyers will debate me, and that's why it automatically goes to the lawyers. But from my perspective, if you look at HIPAA, one of the P's in HIPAA is portability, and HIPAA is about continuity of care. And social service is 80% of someone's overall health. So when you look at social determinants of health, 20% of that has been served can be solved at the doctor's office. 80% is the social determinants. Their access to food, clothing, work, shelter, social supports, like all of that. But for so long, we've been trying to solve it separately. And so the next step to the network of care is another higher level that you'll hear more about, is called the South Dakota Community Information Exchange, which we're partnering with the Department of Health to integrate healthcare with social service. So a CHW or a nurse or a doctor, like let's say they're working with someone who is diabetic. If they say, okay, we're going to come back in a month to see if you've improved, but you need access to food and you need to get your insulin refrigerated. Great, we'll see you in a month. See you later. And they leave and they don't have access to food. They don't have refrigeration. Is that going to improve at all? Probably not. And so the whole vision of the Community Information Exchange and the network of care is they send a warm referral to that agent, that social service agency that might be able to help. They send, yep, Betsy came, we got her connected, and that goes back in. So the doctor and the social service, we can start to see, because we cannot keep operating separately. So the network of care is a higher level intensity of case management coordination in Brookings and Watertown. And then the CIE will be led by the Department of Health. We're a subject matter expertise on that to help get social services on board. That will be statewide. So they're currently in some contracting with a technology provider, because the whole role, and I think I know some of you are running through like, well, we already have this system and this system and this system, and now there's going to be another system. And really the conversation needs to be system integration. There is amazing things you can do with technology through secure file uploads, through APIs, through all of that. And I think it's saying, okay, XYZ agency, you need to use this system because of that, but how can we connect and feed information back and forth? So we remove that burden on the individual to continue to connect the dots in an already life that has crises and children and family and supper planning and all that kind of stuff. So that is a real brief of the network of care and the CIE, but we will be watching. There will be more, because as we learn more with the Department of Health and how that CIE is, if you're in Brookings and Watertown, you certainly can reach out, because we have a staff member helping with those two communities to get the network of care launched. And the network of care will feed into the CIE once that is developed. So that's the other exciting thing going on. 988 and connecting, but it all needs to be connected, because when we know more, we can help people. And I think it's people first, and with the respect of person confidentiality and release of information. So don't worry, that is being covered. If there's a lawyer in the room going, it has been done in other parts of the nation, and there's some really cool models out there. So we're not going into completely uncharted territory with these conversations and collaborations.
Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you so much, Betsy, for joining us. We could all give you some jazz hands. Jazz hands.
Hey, you got me out of office cleaning, so
yeah,
I think it's done, because I can't hear him anymore. So I'll be dirty. I'll be like, hey, this is a great Friday. So thank you.
We're happy to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.